Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo están? Pero muy buenas noches, muy buenas tardes a todos quienes nos están escuchando. Quiero saber desde dónde están. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas. Welcome everybody to the Bilingual Hour, un espacio que tiene como fin educar, hablar sobre diversos temas que hacen al trabajo, a la educación, al liderazgo, a la carrera, bueno, y los medios sociales. Bueno, esta es la segunda edición, la primera la hicimos el año pasado y bueno, y estamos retomando ahora, a fines del año pasado, estamos ahora retomando el ciclo. eh, y bueno, para hablar, como les dije, para educar, para acercar el mundo de habla hispana con el mundo de habla inglesa también. Por eso es una hora bilingüe en la que ambos idiomas se encuentran. Bien, nuestra invitada de hoy es una profesional de recursos humanos con gran experiencia en liderazgo. Estamos hablando de Miyelmi Abraham. Miyelmi Abraham es de Venezuela, vive hace mucho tiempo en Miami y ha desarrollado una exitosa carrera y es una gran eh, contribuidora, estoy pensando en inglés, ¿no? Contributor, alguien contribuye con mucho material aquí en esta red social que es LinkedIn. Bueno, Miyelmi ha trabajado en empresas de la lista Fortune 500, de la lista Fortune 500, que son las empresas más importantes de Estados Unidos, para crear equipos de alto rendimiento. Es también orientadora laboral y profesora universitaria que ayuda a profesionales de alto potencial y ejecutivos de alto nivel a desarrollar sus habilidades de liderazgo. Vamos a conversar con ella en segundos. Pero antes voy a recibir a mi compañera en la conducción y producción de este espacio, que también es de Venezuela, solo que está en Chile, así que estamos haciendo una, una articulación desde tres países, ¿no? Desde nuestra invitada, que va a estar en segundos, está en Miami, en Estados Unidos. Un servidor está en Montevideo, Uruguay. Y Gaby Rincón, que también es de Venezuela, pero nos recibe desde Chile. ¿Cómo estás? How are you doing, Gaby?
Great. Good evening. I'm great. So excited about today.
Okay, yes, I think it will be a great conversation, sorry. Bueno, cada tanto yo voy a estar haciendo algún resumen de lo que vamos conversando en español, así vamos, para aquellos que no tengan un poco se les pierda algo, bueno, los vamos a ayudar. Well, Gaby, for the English-speaking audience, we have an English-speaking audience. There are people who have contacted me to tell me that they were going to listen to this installment of the Bilingual Hour. What can you tell them about the person who is here today with us?
I'm excited. First of all, thank you so much for joining, everyone. It's nice to have you all. I mean, this is such a, great idea. Having a bilingual hour is, a different thing and is so helpful, right? And today we're excited to have Miyelmi. She's Venezuelan like me, but she's in the States. She's an experienced leader and human resources professional. She has worked with Fortune 500 companies, which is huge, to build high performing teams. She's also a career coach and a university professor. And that reminds me, when I was teaching at the UCV in Venezuela, that I taught, like at university. So I know it is challenging and it is, like, yeah, it is wonderful anyways, right? So she's a university professor who helps high potential professionals and C-level executives make the most of their leadership skills. And that's why the title of today's conversation is about effective communication for leaders. So there you go.
Hi, Miyelmi. Glad to have you. I'm not listening to her.
Me neither.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? I'm so sorry. The pleasure is mine. Thank you so much for having me here. Well, I apologize in advance because my hoarse voice, for today, but I will be drinking water just to, if you can
Tell
hear
me.
me a bit hoarsely. Yeah, thank you for that amazing introduction, guys. I didn't know all of those stuff about me.
We
we,
did
we,
our
we
research.
yes, we checked, yeah, your profile and
You did a great job, actually.
Oh,
No,
thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
I really appreciate this time. When I got the invitation from Alex, I was excited. I think this is an important space for us to share with our communities here on LinkedIn, and it's the best part of having the opportunity to share with both, those like Spanish and English speaker, because I can tell you sometimes I struggle with I have people, a community in Spanish is a Spanish speakers, and I have English speakers too, and sometimes I struggle in how can I share the content, my posts, and sometimes I just do it actually in both languages, trying to deliver the message for both. Sometimes I just do it separately, but I love this opportunity, and I really appreciate that you invited me.
Good. Great. Great. That's awesome. Well, before starting with the topic we have agreed to talk about today, it's all about leadership, specifically
Effective communication.
effective communication.
Mhm.
Thank you. I loved a post you wrote a few days ago,
Mhm.
where you told your story, because there is that belief that immigrants had to work uh,
And everything.
in
Yeah.
yeah, whatever. and
Yeah.
and you went against that belief, and you had a strong purpose, I think, and that led you to achieve your
My
present
God.
professional success. So, what can you tell us about that belief? And could you explain a bit more about your experience arriving at the United States? And how that experience, I think it could be powerful and very inspiring for many
Absolutely.
people who are are migrating, and they are facing new challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that. out, Alex. Yeah, actually, I shared that post because that was my first day working with MIT. MIT is one of the most important universities in the US. And 9 years ago, when I came to the US, I never imagined that that was a possibility, to be honest. When I used to work with Fortune 500 companies in Venezuela first, um, and I was in love with my job. I used to work training and development people in sales and marketing teams, working with different countries in Latin America. And when you come to the US, and many people will tell you, forget about your experience, forget about your background. So be ready to work in everything, because immigrants cannot work in your profession. Be willing to do whatever you have to do. And it's kind of like a mix of of emotions, in terms of like, yeah, that could be true. And I started doing everything, of course, like everyone else. I remember I work in a mall. I work in a library, not in a library. It was a learning store, actually. But I learned a lot from all of those works. I cannot lie you, and I enjoy all of them. But I was not satisfied with the way I was, working. I was so frustrated. I was not enough money, for all of the things that I want to do with my kids. And so I set myself a goal to find a corporate role related with uh, that people driven experience that I had in the past. So I certify, I mean, as a part of my goal, which is the first step from my perspective, we all of us we should have. I just make a list of all of the good things that all of the things that I'm pretty good at. Um, I make a list of the positions that I would like to consider to apply. I just start, doing my research. What should I do if I want to get a job in this? What do I need? What kind of competencies? What kind of skill set I need? So I start working on those. Like I got my certification as a professional coach as a first step to get closer to working with people in one-on-one approaches. And then I I remembered I applied to a job with Randstad. Randstad is a Fortune 500 company too. Is one of the largest HR companies in the world. So I applied to that job. I remember the feedback I got for the manager at that time, 8 years ago. She told me like she didn't see, that like a spark
Mm-hmm.
feeling, in that conversation. So she didn't get it. And she was like, no, 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 you're not. I said, okay. So I lost it. But I just started working hard and I follow her on LinkedIn. I was kind of like not stalking her, but I kind of like, start working and what of the things they do, what is her style, what
Yes.
how the people she works with looks like, what they do, what is their experience about. And like 7 years after that conversation, actually, of course, I had other jobs, but I got my first HR job in a large corporations. I did some HR
7
before.
years after.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. It took me
Okay.
7 years for that company.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, my first corporate job that I got, it was 1 year after I came to the
Okay.
US. But for that company, it took me 7 years. I'm not gonna lie you, but it was because I was getting ready for that role and
Yes.
specifically. So I remember I sent her an email, the same manager, but she was a director, a regional director for all of the South Florida team at that point. And I told her, listen, take a look at my LinkedIn profile and see, if I'm convinced that I have what you're looking for, but just take a look and let me know. And of course, at the end, she called me and I got the job through a whole hard interview process. And I start my, like formal HR with large corporations at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But the pandemic came.
All
So
right.
that's a different story, right? Okay.
Mhm.
So when the pandemic came, of course, staffing agency was not, the that industry went down because many people, their companies were not hiring staffing, either
Yes.
temporary or. So
Mm-hmm.
at the end, I started the recruiting mind. And all of the things that I do is I put together all of my experiences as a coach, as an
Mm.
HR person. Then I got another job in the meantime. I did both things. Actually, I got last year I was promoted for a regional position, supporting all of the learning and development strategy for a global company. And at the same time, I was working with a recruiting mind as well as a career coach, helping people to find meaningful jobs. When I started the recruiting mind, it was interesting the way I felt at that time, because I was like, how can I have customers in the American market, English speakers, native English speaker, right? And how I can sell them my services as a resume writer, as an interview preparations expert, as a
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn mentor, when they can see that English is not my first language. And it was so curious that when I started talking to them, actually that job was the job where I made the most of my English, because I was starting talking to them, and it was
Mm-hmm.
only us. I have to deal with that, and they were so receptive. They were so open minded, and every time that I submit a document, they never make any amendment, any change. Everything was pretty good, and they were so excited. And as you can see on my profile, the results of my work has been very satisfactory for them. So at this point, I started, and that's why, going back to the post, that's why I shared that post, because I started thinking I need to do more to help people, Latin American people,
Yes.
Spanish speakers, to come to the US or either any other country in a different language to understand they can do it. You
I love
can
it.
do this, because you can, if, of course, you will need be prepared, and you can tell me I can now wait 7 years. Again, I did not wait 7 years to get a job. I
Mm.
just I got it after a year, but that was my dream company, and I
What
set
were
myself that goal.
so in this process? I mean, well, it was 7 years, but you got your first job on the first year, right? So this first year, I mean, how do you get used to, like the culture and the corporate culture? I mean, when you had your first job, how was this, cultural shock? I mean, because it's not only the language, but also, like behavior, the way people act and the way people communicate. So how was that process, that adaptation process, when you started working in a real, international American company?
That's a pretty good question. Yes, I think it's important. One of the things that I like the most about the US is the multicultural environments.
Yes.
People here, even, of course, I am Miami, but across the US, you can see that, because I have friends all over the US. I mean, the country, and the company that I was working most recently, they have the headquarters in New Jersey. And in New Jersey, the environment was the same. It's a multicultural
Mm,
environment. So
yes.
here you can find people, Spanish speaker, French speaker. I work with people from Netherlands. I work with people from Japan. You can find people. You can work with people from African countries. So it's a multicultural environment, and that is why one of the things I was sharing with Alex, it was about the cultural barriers, because
Yes.
for me that's an important step in how we can understand the difference. For us, let me share a couple of examples. I used to
Mm-hmm.
work in a company that it was the owners was Jewish, and I remember one of them, of course, the one of them, they were not Orthodox, and they were very, like regular. Um, they where they meet, let's say hi and shake your hand with them, they were okay. But some of them, the other ones, were Orthodox, and I had to understand and learn that they're not gonna shake your hand if you are a woman, you know. And it's kind of like learn those things is being respectful of their culture. And those are the small things that we need to understand,
Mm-hmm.
even with Spanish speakers as well. Because sometimes I work with people I'm from Venezuela, I work with people from Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I always tell them, like, even when we speak Spanish, we have differences. For instance, in Venezuela, galleta means cookie, right? But for Cuban people, for some Dominican people, even when they understand galleta as a cookie, if you offer them physically, if you show the cookie, if you offer them just, la galleta, it could be a slap on the face. And
Oh
say,
Ajá.
so,
my
it's a different. Would you like a galleta? I say, ho, ho, ho. What do you
Ok.
mean? What's going on here? So it's something very simple, but we need to understand those small differences in order to,
Yes.
Es una gran historia, Miguelmi. Yo estaba, la idea era hacer cada tanto un resumen de lo que estabas hablando, pero estuve
me fue
hablando
mucho, me
con
emocioné.
soporte técnico de Restream porque no estoy pudiendo subir los comentarios de ustedes. Les agradezco mucho los comentarios que nos mandan. Los podemos leer porque tenemos en otra ventana, abrimos
Mm,
LinkedIn y lo podemos ver, pero no podemos subirlos, cosa que nos gustaría, nos da mucha pena. Entonces estuve hablando con soporte técnico, pero no me, bueno, de momento el tema no se puede resolver, pero bueno, al menos se trató para
No,
que
no
no se
worries.
repita en futuras instancias. Bueno, así que Miguelmi nos decía, en resumidas cuentas, que galleta en Cuba no es una cookie, es una cachetada. No, por
Una
supuesto, esto era
cacheta.
lo último de lo que habló, no es el resumen de la charla, sino toda la peripecia, ¿no?, para lograr el trabajo que deseaba en una empresa importante y de prestigio, que le llevó muchos años, pero que al final, bueno, se logra, ¿no? Y bueno, y con todo esa riqueza cultural que tiene Estados Unidos, el país donde que recibe inmigrantes de todo el mundo, entonces, claro,
ujú.
no solo hay que aprender la cultura norteamericana, sino también la cultura de todo el mundo. Es un desafío para todos, la verdad, este, es maravilloso, ¿no? Bueno, muy bien. Entonces, ¿qué les parece si ya comenzamos a hablar del tema que nos convoca hoy, que es el liderazgo efectivo,
Yes.
la comunicación efectiva? Ahí está, hidrata tus cuerdas vocales, que tenemos todavía 35 minutos por delante. La comunicación efectiva en el liderazgo. Effective communications for leaders. Um, well, why is important, Miguelmi, for leaders to work
Communicate effectively.
on their communication skills, to communicate effectively?
That's a pretty good question, Ale. Well, I think this is there are multiple skills that we need as a leaders, right? But for me, communication is the kind of like the foundation of a great leadership. And overall for everyone, for any relationship, communication is essential. Effective communication, because that's the different. That word makes it different.
Mm-hmm.
Communication is everything that we communicate, right? But effective communication is when the message that I intend to deliver was delivered effectively, right? So you get it, you receive it in the proper way, and you got the message and the purpose of the message the same way. So when we both agree on the message outcome, was effective communication. But many people don't know things like the type of communication is there is a variety of communications like visual communication. For instance, if I
Mm-hmm.
share like the flyer that you sent us say a lot of things about this event without no one speaking, right? Of course, it's verbal communication, which is the most common, is using we communicate by using words. There is a nonverbal communication, of course, which is everything that we communicate with our faces, with our facial expressions, with our body language.
Mm-hmm.
Reading communications, of course, is everything is of the formal process with letters or emails. So but the important thing about this, and I like always to mention the Moravian's model. Moravian's Moravian's communication models propose that only 7% of our communication is with words, is verbal communication. So can you imagine 93% of what we communicate is not what we said, is how we say it and how our body is expressing. So it's kind of like I started saying, "Hi guys, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me." It's kind of like even when I'm saying that I'm happy, nobody will. I always I used to love that comics. I don't remember it was Droopy, I guess. I don't know, like that dog. It was a dog. He always say, "You know what? I'm happy," and he
Oh
was
yes,
Snoopy.
kind of droopy,
Snoopy.
right?
No,
Snoopy.
No, no, it was
Snoopy.
Snoopy. No, Snoopy.
no.
No, I think it
No?
was droopy, but whatever.
Yeah, that is the
So,
one who, yeah, like
No.
I don't know, detectives or something like that, right?
someone who can help us, please. We're not finding the way. Okay, so
This
we
is
got
cringe.
yeah. So we got
Yes,
an answer on
it's
this.
droopy. Yes, the
Droopy,
dog
right?
with the face like this.
Exactly,
Yes,
exactly. Yeah,
that's droopy.
droopy. Yeah, droopy. Someone mentioned it on the link.
Mhm. Thank you,
Thank
Federico.
you. Yeah, so it's the same, when I communicated something, sometimes I saw that in HR a lot of time, leaders delivering feedback in and or sometimes like a contributor came to the manager and the manager was on the phone. So your body language is saying,
Yes.
I don't care what you have to say. And when you see that and say hello, someone is talking to you. So, so take the time to do that. If you don't have the time, at that moment, so take the time to tell to that person, like, listen, I'm very busy on this. I know that is important. So if you could wait, can we address this 5 minutes later, or just ask questions, of course, before tell that person you don't have time, because if they are fighting out there,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, there is a conflict that you need to address immediately. So take the time to understand, and that is why I structure, like, for me are three things that are very important for leaders to keep in mind.
Ok,
First of all,
ok. Ya
okay.
vamos a eso. ya vamos a eso. Voy a hacer ahora cumplir con la idea de hacer un wrap up. Bueno, lo que nos dice Miyelmi es que es importante la comunicación para el desarrollo de una relación, cualquiera sea, ¿no? Las relaciones.
Mhm.
Y nos habló de que hay varios tipos de comunicación. Justamente lo que nos convoca es la comunicación efectiva. Nos habló de la comunicación visual, que la tenemos en carteles, pancartas, yo qué sé, todo, los logotipos, colores, tipografía, las letras, yo qué sé. Bueno, la comunicación verbal, las palabras, ¿no? Lo no verbal, que hablamos de las expresiones faciales, el lenguaje corporal. Y después, no sé, dijiste letter communication es los
Yeah, the
mails,
reading, la,
reading, ok.
reading, la escrita.
Ahí está, ok, perfecto. La comunicación escrita, ok, lo que comunicamos a través de un mail, de un chat, etcétera.
Yeah,
Bien.
because that's important also. Sorry that interrupted you, because sometimes we just write an email, and the
Yes.
recipient put the intention and the tone that they want to hear. If
Mhm.
I sometimes in my boss send me a message and it just, how are you going with the project or the timeline or the task, but they are not they're not mad, they just ask, to see if you need help. But if I'm mad with my boss, if I'm like, "Ugh, that I don't like that person at that point," or I'm just no, I get it that way. So that's the way I'm gonna read the message and receive
Ujú,
it in a probably in the wrong way.
Yeah.
ujú,
Something that I always talk to my students is about the way we speak in Spanish, because we speak a lot and we use a lot of words, to explain things, and we elaborate too much, everything,
ujú,
right? And especially when writing emails, it's like we write a lot, and we want to explain every single thing and give all the possible details. And it's like, and their answer, I mean, is like, will do. And then you're like, what? I mean, I made such an effort. So we need to learn that they don't communicate the same way we do. And we have to be as precise as possible, right? Using the minimum amount of words, phrases that we can, because it's
Yeah.
different. It's just different. It's just a different way to communicate.
Don't use 10 words if you need to, if you can use it five, if you can five. So
Exactly.
no,
Yeah.
and that's true. I remember that's the point. When you start in English, that's why I always tell people, like, you know, if you have the time to speak with someone, is better than just going, step by step. Because I could, I mean, like, small, how are you? Even the how are you? They ask you, like, hi, how are you? That's the way they teach you at school. But I remember the first time when someone here told me, like, yeah, how's it going? And I was like, what? I'm sorry, what? Oh, how's it going? And I was, excuse me.
Going
So
where?
yeah, it's kind of like what he's telling me. Or when someone tell you, like, how is it going so far? And it was so far, far, far away. For me, far is, you know,
Oh my God.
and it was like, how is it going so far? So, ¿cómo va hasta ahora? ¿Sabes? That's a different thing. It's
Yes.
kind of like, oh, that's mean this. And like you said, it's something like, will do. It's not, I will do it. No, will do. That's the way they communicate, especially here in the US. Probably
Mm-hmm.
um, in Europe and I mean, the British English is different, but here that's the way they communicate, and that's the way they're expecting things. Sometimes, that informal communication
Mm-hmm.
um, make a huge difference. And if we capitalize, things when it's not necessary, we're sending a different message. So the communication is complex, but for me, it's important because of course you can build trust, you can build a strong relationship, improve productivity, in consequence. um uh, it's a it's easier to solve conflicts, for conflict resolution. It's easier if you communicate properly. Improve collaboration, because if we can talk, and you show that you really care, because the way you communicate
Mhm.
can share, can express that, like I can show you that I care about you the way I sit myself in front of you and look into, to your eyes. I mean, listen, as a parent, I live that as a way. Every time that I'm talking with my kids, and if I'm not seeing them, like making eye contact, they hit me on my hand. Listen, 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 until I don't do that, until they not don't stop. Even when I'm saying, tell me, papi, tell me, I can hear you. No, make eye contact.
Look
It's
at
okay.
me.
Yes. So starting by that, what I do is, when I don't have time to make eye contact because I'm in the middle of something, like this conversation, for instance, I always tell them, so please give me 10 minutes, because now I cannot pay the attention you deserve. And that
Yes.
is important for us as a leaders. We take care, like I was saying. You can go ahead, Alejandro, and then I can explain the
Yes.
three things that for me are very important
Okay,
for the
go
leaders.
ahead. Go ahead with your explanation.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was saying, like, for me, the first things to do to be a great communicator as a leader is um, active listening. But listening to understand. Don't listen to answer, because
Yes.
an important step. We just listen.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm waiting that this person finish to answer what I have in my mind. No, listen to understand the point of view of that person, because that way you can get as much information as you can. Sometimes we make conclusions. I was telling before we started an experience that I have on my as an HR. Someone, one employee came to me with an sexual harassment, accusation. And when that person said that statement, and sexual harassment got serious here, of course, and we started the investigation. What happened was that the person said something in Spanish, which is a combination of what we have talked about, the cultural barriers, and how a misunderstanding could get really bad.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So the person says something in Spanish. It's an expression that we actually use in Venezuela. But the word that person used, it refers to a part of the body for men. So even when it was an innocent, I'm sorry, an innocent expression,
Mhm.
right? He said that word, and that was the only word that the other person heard. And she was an English speaker, but she heard that word and she understood what that word means. But she didn't know the expression, and she said, "No, he said that word." And when I asked the rest of the team what he meant, um, they said nothing.
Mm.
And it was funny because actually the context of the word was nothing. Literally, it was they were not avoiding the answer. There was literally the context when he used that word. He said something like, she doesn't understand nothing, but he did it in a colloquial way, in a informal way. So she got confused and she said it was sexual harassment. So I don't feel comfortable working with that person. So I had to explain it to her what the expression means in my country,
Mhm.
Google it also, show to her, like, the translation. Listen, this is an expression, this is what this means, and all of the other people around bringing in the investigation. It was hard, but at that point, if we don't get that, the person could lose the job, because it was a sexual harassment. Um I forgot the word, like the denuncia.
But they were sued because of that
Yes.
suing.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was
Wow.
her intention at that point, and that person could lose a job.
Of
So
course.
it's
Because of a
important for us.
misunderstanding, right?
Exactly.
And something that I always, well, for example, right now in our membership, we're working on vowel sounds. And it's crazy because they're realizing how important vowel sounds are. Because I mean, you can just, I mean, just by moving your mouth in just, like a little bit different of what you normally do, you're pronouncing a different word. And in the context, it may have no sense, right? It makes no sense. But if you pronounce them correctly, of course, it is easier for others to understand you. And especially Americans, because most of the population, they are monolingual. I mean, they're not bilingual. I mean, they only know English and they haven't gone through this, learning process. So if you mispronounce a word because of a vowel, they will not understand. And it's not like they don't have these processes that we English learners have that we can associate. It's like our brain is prepared for making these connections like, okay, maybe he tried to say this or that. But Americans cannot. I mean, it's like if it's not the way it is, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and
So
that's happened a lot with so many words here. So it's too difficult sometimes to say, okay, cheat, 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 and there's so many. Okay, which one are you saying? Because I'm not following this exact.
yes.
That happened a lot here. And you're right. Actually, I struggle a lot when I say that I work with Shell because of the S sound. And sometimes they say shell. What is that shell? And I say, okay, shell. I work with. So at the end, I say, okay, the oil and gas company, the energy company. Do you know that the shell? I mean, it's like some examples. And the other one that I mentioned to you, like the focus, is important. Is
Yes.
we pronounce that well because
Mm-hmm.
there is a you
It's
here,
a diphthong.
there,
Yep.
and that sounds like you make a huge difference of the word. So we need to understand how to pronounce sometimes, and that's why I always tell my mom is studying English now, and I told her, they say, but they can understand. No, try to
No.
pronounce it,
Yes.
and some people sometimes even small things like the difference between the T, the D,
Yes.
and the P. So it's kind of like how you pronounce it. It's not easy. Of course, it's not our first language.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some words, for instance, I learned that the American people don't say see you tomorrow. They use the T as an R sometimes, and they say see you tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, okay, see you tomorrow. And you just started, say, okay, that's the way it is. They don't say Gatorade, they say Gatorade. And,
Mm-hmm.
so some small things that you start, but when you practice a lot, that help you. That's the
Yes.
best
Mhm.
way to build your English, when they having those conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Awareness.
hmm well, there are many cafes that can happen when you are in a multilingual, multicultural environment. I
Mm-hmm.
can. I worked in hospitality, so there are many, many, many things. And when I was new to the industry, I was getting accustomed to all of that. Well, many things can happen. Well, so you said you might ask questions. Decía Miyelmi, como una clave, una de las claves que daba para la comunicación efectiva era hacer preguntas, ask
Mm-hmm.
questions. Que si lo tradujéramos literalmente sería preguntar preguntas, ¿no? Bueno, bien. Hacer preguntas, ask questions, tomarse el tiempo para entender. Por ahí citaba un caso de un presunto caso de abuso sexual o sí,
De acoso,
de
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 acoso
acoso.
acoso.
sexual, sexual harassment, que la persona estaba a punto de denunciar, to
Mm-hmm.
denounce, para a efectos porque había interpretado mal una palabra de un compañero hispanohablante que había hecho una traducción literal, ¿no? Aparentemente, ¿no? Muy bien. Entonces, está bueno esto que tú has dicho de la escucha activa.
Ese es el
Entender,
primero.
ujú, entender, no para responder. O sea, escuchar no para responder, sino para entender. Understand. So, active listening, that's the first one. So, we need, there,
Two
there are
more.
two more keys. Okay, tell us, please.
Yes. The next one for me is empathy. And many people confuse empathy with just um, feel the same way that person, in terms of like how I would do the things if I'm in Alejandro's shoes. But that's not empathy, because if I'm on your shoes, but I'm myself, I cannot see it the same way that you see it because you're a different person. Empathy is understand your point of view. And if I don't take the time to do that, if I say something like, yeah, that's not important, or that's not a good idea, or that's never gonna work here, or that's if I don't take the time to understand what that person is explaining, how that person feels. I used to work in a warehouse with over 500 people. 90% of them were women, and they were on a daily basis many things because some of them they were single moms. They need to they got a call from school. They need to pick the children up. There's so many things. They were frustrated. They don't want to lose the job, and on a daily basis that happen. And if you don't take the time to understand how that situation is affecting my people, how that feeling, that like if I have inflexible processes, if I'm not um you know I cannot offer to them the opportunity to, I don't know, to go to pick them their kids up and going back to war. If my processes are too rigid, probably I'm not feeling the impact of what I'm doing is affecting them. and
Ok,
and that will
entonces,
impact commitment,
empatía.
engagement, and motivation.
Thank you. Thank you. Empatía, entonces, como un segundo elemento, que no es solamente, que no es, que lo llevabas un poco más allá de lo que eran ponerse en los zapatos del otro, sino tener procesos que sean más elásticos, que esto iba a generar engagement, you said
Motivation.
motivation, ok. Ok. ¿Y el tercer punto?
El tercero,
The third,
assertiveness.
okay,
Assertive.
assertiveness. I like that.
Yes, because once I have my point of view too, right? Even if I'm the manager, it doesn't mean like I'm going to see the things like the individual contributor seeing or the employee seeing it, right? So, but you need to be assertive in the way you communicate your point of view without affecting the other person, being respectful of that person. So it's important when we take the time to listen and understand. We understand their feelings and how because when you are empathetic, you also see the ways that you can help that person. And at that point, your point of view will be delivered with assertiveness in an easy way, if that makes sense.
Ok, bien, la asertividad, que muchas veces se confunde, la gente a veces me pone en comentarios acá en LinkedIn, Alejandro, es muy asertivo lo que usted ha escrito, no, habrán querido decir que es muy acertado,
Acertado.
pero, o muy cierto, pero no es lo mismo cierto que asertivo es un estilo de comunicación, ¿verdad? Y bueno, ahí tú decías, ¿no? De esa capacidad para expresarse de una manera muy respetuosa con los demás, tiene que ver con eso y es todo un tema, hay libros escritos sobre eso, ¿no? Okay, so very interesting. Thank you for the comments. Thank you, Jasmine, for your contributions. LinkedIn user here. Thank you very much for your comments. Unfortunately, we are not able to post them here on this to put them on the screen. Gabi,
Mhm.
tell us what more questions you have for our guest today.
A lot. Regarding leadership, we have a lot of questions. But what about, okay, we talk about cultural barriers. I mean, before, like wrapping up this, cultural aspect, what would you say are one or two main barriers that non-native English speakers will face once they start, like in this corporate world? What would be two, one cultural barriers we need to prepare for?
Well, that's a pretty good question. I think is the first step is understand the culture that you are around with, because some people, I mean, they're a multicultural environment, so I
Mhm.
need to understand, like you said, if there is a religious aspects within my team, if there is a something that is cultural about the country, the way we talk, the way the music, even the music is important. If if they listen music, they
Mhm.
don't like music. So I think it's may vary. United States, like I mentioned to you before, what I like the most about the corporate world here is the multicultural opportunity for you to have the opportunity to work with people around the world. Um, and you can find people from Africa, you can find people from Asia, from Europe, of course, from America. But it's important to be prepared, to have like mindset to learn different cultures, to learn different things, to discover that we're not the only ones.
Yes.
As a Venezuelan and with responsibility, I'm going to tell you this. Many Venezuelan people used to think that we have the most beautiful things in our country. And you can hear sometime, I heard sometime in the past, like no beaches in the world like Venezuelan beaches. No, there's no food that good like Venezuelan food. But then you have Colombian friend and they serve the same food, or very similar food, and they do the same. Yeah, I like to do this, and I like chicharrones, and I like the arepa, and I no, we have tequeños too. And I say, look, so it's kind of like start discovering people, start meeting people, learn
Mhm.
more about them, what they have to offer. The way I had a good friend of mine, and she's from Argentina, and I remember when we had meetings and we set the food for the meetings. Um, I remember there was empanadas and there was
Mm.
for like desserts. For me, it was
Okay.
dessert, right? Because it was sweet. And she told me like, "What are we gonna eat first?" And I say, "It's early in the morning, of course, the empanadas." And she said, "No, we start with something sweet. Breakfast
Yes.
is something sweet." And it was
Mhm.
no, for us, it's not a way. For us, it's too early for sweet. So that's a different. And when
Yes.
you take the time to understand those small pieces of your cultural differences, it's easier for you to, okay, if we want to have breakfast, let's
Yes.
have things sweet, let's have empanadas, let's have, things for everyone in the
Yeah.
room, because that's the real diversity of inclusion. That's the real when you
Absolutely.
start considering all of the point of view of people. It's not just the way I talk, it's the things I do to
Mhm.
include that people.
Just before we continue, like I always talk about, I mean, one of the things that we got to do is prepare, for this. If the person is going to start working in an international company or traveling or whatever, is learning English, right? And having, I mean, it's about having a standard accent. I really don't mean like, oh, having an American accent, having a British accent. It's not about that. It's not about losing your identity and blah blah blah, but it's about being intelligible, you know. Because especially in international companies, that you have people from different parts of the world. I mean, if I sound too Venezuelan in my English, Japanese people will not understand anything. I mean, it makes no sense. So I think to make things easier, for yourself, I mean, improving your English, I mean, your pronunciation and your accent, so you can have some kind of a standard accent that anyone can understand, that is going to help you, like adapt. I mean, that is going to help the adaptation process easier, right? And faster, because
Yeah,
people will be
totally,
able to understand you, right?
totally.
Sí. Perdón, hay una cosa que, por ejemplo, Miyelmi habló del postre, de dessert.
Mm-hmm.
Postre se dice, en inglés se dice dessert o dessert. De las dos maneras está admitido. Y las dos pronunciaciones son correctas, o sea, los dos acentos. Podemos acentuar en la primera sílaba o en la última, dessert o dessert. Pero yo una vez, hablando con huéspedes, dije desert y no me entendieron, porque claro, agarraron para el lado del desierto, del Sahara.
Mm-hmm.
Entonces ahí me corrigieron la cuestión del desert. O sea que aunque esté correcto decir desert, pero a efecto de ser mejor entendido y desambiguar, desert sería la manera, the most convenient way of
Yeah, totally. And that is
speaking.
a great example of something that Gavi mentioned before, like just the pronunciation of one
Vowel, yeah.
vowel make a huge
Intonation.
difference. Yes, make a huge difference sometimes with words. Just like light is an important example, because light, when you pronounce in different ways, can mean so many things.
Yes.
So, and the difference is just the T or the G, or it's kind of like, oh my gosh. So,
and
and
it's
of
it
course, you need to understand the context as well.
yes, and it's crazy. I mean, we are working on vowels, and in Spanish we only have five. I mean, a, e, I, o, u. That's it. But in English there are 16 vowel sounds. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
you have more than 10 different ways, to the ones that you already know. So, and we need to be aware of that and to learn how to produce those sounds, right? And that is going to change, the way people perceive you, right?
Yeah.
Because that makes a switch in terms of your English and the way you can communicate effectively.
And you have mentioned an important thing, Gabby, and thank you for bringing that in terms of like the English. Many people that come to the US sometimes think like, if if you are in Miami, you don't need English at all. A lot of people will understand you, so you don't need English. That's not true. I mean, if you are a tourist, for sure, you probably won't need English, because probably you will find someone able to help you in Spanish. And I say
Mm-hmm.
probably because I saw in the past many people struggling because, oh my gosh, someone who speak English, Spanish here, right? But you might find someone. But to get a job, if you are set to find and work in everything, whatever you want, okay. If you don't have a goal, a professional goal, if you're not pursuing a specific job, probably that's not a priority for you. But if you learn English, the
Mm-hmm.
possibilities of work, the world of possibilities, uh, the world of possibilities will open to you,
Mm-hmm.
because there are so many opportunities out there. But you need to speak English. And if you speak a fluent English, it's easier to excel at the interview, because if
Absolutely.
not, they're going to sell, like I was mentioned to you at the beginning, or like the Randstad example. They told me like there's no sparkle. Of course, it's easier if you speak English to to move and to express the way you talk as a regular basis. But if you are limited, you're so nervous, you are like, oh, let me just say the basic thing. So No, jump, take the risk, learn English. Wherever you go, do what they do, and learn what you have to learn. And English is an important step here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, we are competing. Our competitors are people doing same things like us in Europe. They speak up to 5 languages. So
Yes.
it's not that hard, just learn one,
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, we are in the final minutes. Oh,
We have another
And a new
visitor, another
guest,
guest.
another
yeah.
guest. Yay!
Xiao is here. Xiao is Chinese. Xiao. So there's another language here. Xiao means little. And she's
Beautiful.
here with us. Well, I don't know if you have any questions, Xiao, about effective communications, body language. Uh, well, Gabby, let's wrap up. If you think, let's select another an important question, the most relevant question. We have to, from all the questions we have prepared,
Yes.
and well, let's start the end of this conversation.
What about dealing with a conflict? Well, how can leaders, well, talking about leaders, not, English learners or speakers, but as leaders, how to tackle difficult situations, how to deal with conflict when it arises, in your office, in your team. What would you recommend uh, people?
For those apply the elements that I share with you actually are pretty good in terms of like listen what happened, but from both parties, understand what happened from both perspective,
Mm-hmm.
run an investigation if necessary, but listen the parties again to understand what happened without bias, because that's important. If you feel as a leader that there are two people that you could feel some preference for one of them or favoritism
Mm-hmm.
because the relationship, so stay aware of that. Just find someone else to help you with the process, another colleague, another leader, just bring it into the situation, trying to be
Mm-hmm.
bias free process is important, because I saw so many leaders struggling with conflict resolution. But when you when you see your team members and
Mm-hmm.
think about like, how can I help this person for real, how can I help this person to be more successful, how can help this person to solve this issue, not with judgment, because sometimes we try to solve conflicts from our perspective and being judgmental, and that's not the way. So being empathetic, assertive communication again is important, but also take the time to prepare a bias free process for conflict resolution and address it immediately. Don't leave it for later.
Well, can you elaborate a little more on that bias free?
Yeah, for sure. For instance, I saw so many times actually, if you have a leader with two people on their team, we can see sometimes favoritism, and there is a conflict, right? How can you solve an issue between two people when you have favoritism from one of them?
Mm-hmm.
It's too hard, and it's not fair for the other person, even if that person have is telling the truth, or even if that person was innocent of the process, or depend on what you're saying of what's happened. But I saw that in the past, and the manager was um, has favoritism for one of the parties, and what I did, it was that I ran an investigation, of course, having people from both sides, like this is the friend of the people. Of course, through observation, I got that. And these are friend of this person, these are friend of this, what happened, and also get people like a neutral, people. Um, and I asked to other managers to participate in the process, get what happened, ask questions, get the information. And that's the way we can ensure that we solve the problem, without bias or avoiding unfair treatment, because it happens.
I love it. Well, I don't know if we can conclude, Ale, with this question about what would you recommend? You know, people who are considering to work in an international company, people who are considering to travel to the States and all of that, and they are in a high level position. I mean, maybe for a staff member it might be a little easier, but when you're in a C level or in a managerial position, a director, a supervisor, obviously the communication requirements are higher, right? So what would you recommend these people if they're considering starting, like a job interview process, applying for jobs and all of that? What would you recommend them to focus on in this process? What would be the most important things they need to consider based on your experience and the things that you've learned, through these years?
That's a pretty good question, Gabby. I don't know if you remember when I said about Randstad. I was talking about Randstad. One of the things
Mm-hmm.
I did was pay attention of how people working in Randstad, said, share on LinkedIn, how the way they think, the way they act, the way that interact. I did my research about the company culture,
Mm,
what mattered the most for them, what they talk about, who they are engaged with. And I built,
values.
yes, what are their values. I built a strong network within that company. So when I reach out this person, I don't, to be honest, she didn't even know who I am. She's not like she remember from the first time. No, she's not. She was actually laughing because I told her after I got the job, just to avoid any bias.
Wow.
So, but what I told her, I just connect with her, like send her a message. But when she saw my profile, she saw many people in
Yes.
common. We have many connections in common. So that make her feel more comfortable, to connect with me. So it's important for everyone to set a strategy, including networking, including research, including connection, including
I love it.
learning about the company. That's the way it is. And if it's an international company, think about the things that you have to offer. If you have working in Latin America, looking for a job in the US, companies working within Latin America is more even easier, you know. But if it's not, sells the way you can understand multicultural environments. That's the way you have to
Mm-hmm.
highlight the things you should highlight, because that's what they want,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
I work with many, I work with job seekers, and it's very common that to find in their resumes nationality. Uh, who cares?
Exactly.
um, you what to decide what you include in your resume. You might ask yourself this question: does this add something to my profile?
Mhm.
It's
It's irrelevant.
Yeah, so
yes,
many.
if it's relevant, but more than relevant, if this adds up, mm, because
Yeah, it's not an
it,
invalid.
and there are things that don't add value to your
Mm-hmm.
professional profile, um, or and there are many things that are irrelevant. Yes, so you must decide which things are beneficial to you. Okay,
Yes.
I don't mean that having another nationality won't be beneficial, I think that that doesn't talk about your skills, your competencies,
Exactly.
the
Your
value you can,
achievements.
Yeah.
yeah, and the way you can, the value you can add to the bring to the table, and
Yes.
the way you can help the
Your
company
Totally.
success.
your expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And it's the
So,
same with languages. I always tell my customers like, yeah, well, I speak English like 6 out of 10. And I say, comparing with what?
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 How
Yes, I
how do you
agree.
know if you are a 6 out of 10? It's
Yeah,
not, that's not a reference. So I always tell them like,
I
listen,
love it.
if you are able to communicate your message in English, if you by the way, the American market um, is a friendly market. They're not like, if you're not pronouncing well, I mean, there are two different things. When you mention like it's important if we pronounce well, yes, because it's more effective to us the way we
Mm-hmm.
communicate, right? But it doesn't mean that you're not gonna take you if you don't pronounce your name or pronounce things very well. So they are pretty friend about that. Sometimes, of course, for those
Mm-hmm.
people that are not welcoming people, those are people with problems. That's another conversation.
Yes.
But mostly of them are very friendly, and they will accept you. But what I'm telling them is, if you're able to deliver your message and make you understandable in English, if you should well prepare for the interview. That's the first
Mm-hmm.
step. Going well prepared for the interview.
Yes.
And don't put languages if you don't feel comfortable. Just write your resume in English. Please don't apply to a company in the US with your resume in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way it
Yes.
works. Make your resume in English, apply it in English. Don't mention the languages, because at the end, or you can mention that you speak Spanish too, you know but don't say like have intermediate level of English, or no, don't say that,
They
because
will know
sometimes,
anyways.
yes, and our sometimes our level is even better than they expected. Sometimes it
Mm-hmm.
might depend, of course, of the role. Like I said, the example I shared with you, they told me at the beginning, of course, your English is pretty good. I have people in this office that they don't even speak the English you speak. But for this role, it's a sales position for, to sell to doctors. Actually, it was to doctors across the U.S. And they
Yes.
are very, picky. They are very, they don't like accents. So at
Mm-hmm.
this point, I cannot hire you because of that. But it's not because your English is not good. So uh, it's just an advice, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That's
Special.
very, very important.
Yeah, I think people, I mean, in general, we need to kind of, be aware of what we're looking for. I mean, if you're looking for a managerial position, you cannot expect you're going to get hired if you're a beginner. I mean, you will not. It's impossible. When you're a manager, you need to communicate effectively. You need to communicate with your team. You need to share your ideas clearly. So, I mean, if you're looking for a managerial position and you're not an intermediate, upper intermediate student, do not apply till you prepare first, right? Because
I think they should be prepared. Of
mhm,
course, many people probably that listen to this can tell you like, yeah, I'm not English speaker, and I have a job as a manager here in the U.S. Because there are so many small companies, that people from Latin America, and they feel more
mhm,
comfortable, speak. Actually, to be honest, my first job, that one that I got in the first year, it wasn't it was a small company because they were starting operation in the US, but they have they headquartered in Italia and locations in Argentina and Brazil. And the manager here was Brazilian, and he did not speak any English at all. And when
Wow.
he hired me as an operations manager, because he told me I need someone to speak English with, with customers, with vendors, because he did not understand anything. Even for the interviews, he told me like, oh, we interview people, Spanish speakers or Portuguese speakers, or we did not make the interview, or just do it yourself. But I cannot,
Mm-hmm.
So some people can tell you, yeah, you will find a job, because for him it was easier to hire someone Spanish speaker or Portuguese speaker. However, there are limited opportunities. So if you are ambitious, if you have a real good job, because that was just a 11 per hour job, and I was a manager. I'm not
Wow.
lying to you. Of course, after pandemic, some salaries went up, but it's an 11 per hour. It doesn't make
Mm-hmm.
sense because there's nothing that you can do here in Miami with $11 per hour. I
Absolutely.
know for some places in Latin America might be different. I don't know, but there's nothing that you can do here with that
Mm-hmm.
salary. So limited opportunities if you're not willing to learn English in the US is kind of like a mandatory thing if you want to grow and build a career here.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Good.
yep, yep. Love it.
Ok, bueno, está difícil para resumir todo lo que se ha hablado, pero en resumen, si van a trabajar en Estados Unidos, hablen inglés, no les crean a los que dicen, no, acá hay mucha gente que habla español y acá no hace falta. No, en todos lados te va a beneficiar saber inglés y como decía Miyelmi, si vas a mandar el currículum a una empresa americana, bueno,
Mm-hmm.
que sea en inglés, por favor, porque es así que cómo funcionan las cosas.
Yes.
Well, Miguelmi, it has been a terrific conversation, and to wrap up, we'd like to know, well, about your plans, about your present projects. What can you tell us?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Well, I'm currently working in some leadership coaches, like I mentioned to you, and actually working with two great universities in the US as a career advisor with MIT. And one of their programs they have a blended learning certificate called, it's a GR program for C-level executive, and they put a career advisor to them to help them with their career evolution. And I'm working with them
Mm,
this year, and also working as a teaching assistant with the University of Chicago in a building resilient teams program they have. So those have been an amazing experiences. I can tell you, a dream job, and those are the reasons I decide to jump out of the corporate job or work, because it's easier for me to stay focused on those amazing experiences and what I'm doing now as a career coach. I mean, what I'm still doing as a career coach. There is a huge opportunity here in terms of helping people. My goal is to help people from Latin America to come into the US, helping them, or going to another country as with the different languages, helping them to
that's
achieve
great.
their professional purposes.
How can people connect with you?
Absolutely. Well, all of my social networks are at Miyelmi Abraham. So my name and my last name, Miyelmi Abraham. They can find me,
Mm-hmm.
and I have also the recruitermind.com.
The
The
let me
recruiter
write
mind, la mente del reclutador. The
recruitermind.com.
recruiter mind.
Yes, that's
Website.
your website. Here it is. The recruitermind.com. Okay,
There you
okay,
go. Thank you.
okay. You'll find Miguel Meet there. Okay, well. It was a nice. I hope you all had a nice time, as we did have, Gabby.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Miguelmi, for
Thank
being
you.
with
It
us
has been
tonight.
my
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. It has been very inspiring, especially
Thank you.
inspiring for those who are, like have this idea of, you know, pivoting or at least just moving or looking for, new challenges, international challenges. It is absolutely, inspiring considering that you're from Venezuela, like me. So I'm absolutely, happy and proud to be,
Thank you.
and thanks for sharing your
Likewise.
story with us and to show us that it is possible. We
It
can make
is.
things happen if we want to. So
Yes, you're
thanks
right.
for
It
that.
is. It is possible, and you can do it. Whatever you want to do it, you can.
Y ustedes permanezcan atentos, atentas, porque pronto tendremos la tercera edición de The Bilingual Hour, así que vamos a decidir con Gaby, entre la lista de posibles invitados que tenemos, quién vendrá, lo anunciaremos oportunamente en nuestros perfiles. Bueno,
Yes.
que tengan una muy buena noche y
Thank you.
excelente semana.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye, everyone.
bye.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Bye.